Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thanks for joining today. So let's get started. I'm going to give a little introduction and then of course I will give the floor to our host for today's session. But I wanted to tell you a little bit of opening words before. I think it is very important that open source projects, as they thrive on the passion and collaboration of their communities. We can see that contributions, feedback, and shared expertise are the lifeblood of innovation. But even the most groundbreaking projects can only reach their full potential when they are widely adopted and put into practice. So that's why events like this are so important. They don't just inspire, they empower by bringing together experts and enthusiasts, as you are, and you are a lot today. We fuel the adoption to production cycle, turning ideas into real-world solutions. So you have been allowed to register to this session, and this is a very good indicator for us of the level of interest on the project itself. Today, we're here to help you become familiar with CDM and give you a hands-on experience with RUNE and Rosetta. Whether you're just starting out or looking to have more expertise, this masterclass is really designed to equip you with the knowledge and skills you need to make an impact. So let's get started. Lionel will be your guide, and please share any feedback to make sure that we can replicate this kind of event in the future. Thank you so much. Lionel, the floor is yours.
Olivier, thank you very much for that introduction. I'll get stuck straight in. I think the title of this presentation is pretty clear and on the screen. So we're going to start. We're just going to give you a little bit of an overview about how we're going to run this masterclass. So I'm Lionel. I'm head of client services at Regnosys. You can see two of my colleagues on the video as well, Akash and Oscar. I will be doing most, if not all, the talking, but Akash and Oscar will be active in the chat window and also using the Q&A facility. We can't hear any of you, but don't let that stop you interacting with us. Do please ask your questions or chat any comments, and we'll try and address those either through chat or I will speak to them as well. So I've covered this page already in saying that you can find the chat and the QA buttons. Someone has already asked, yes, it will be recorded and FINOS will make it available shortly afterwards. There are also other materials that we will reference throughout, and we have some URLs, and we would suggest that those are all available after the masterclass, and you can go through some of the exercises we're going to do together on your own at a later date. So if you saw the sign-up materials, this is designed to be a more interactive interclass, not just a one-way webinar. We're hoping that you have all got access to Rosetta, so you should be able to get to the workspace manager at the URL at the top of this screen using your user ID. You should have access to the dark blue CDM tile in the center of my picture here, and also the light purple one to the left. If you've used a corporate email address, we will also have given you, with the permission of ISDA, access to DRR, the orange tile on the right, and its companion DRR for Acme Bank, the pale green one. If you have any problems with that, we are here to help. And specifically, you'll see within Rosetta, down in the bottom right-hand corner, this little chat icon. That's where you can go and request help, not only today, but any time that you are using Rosetta, if you need any help. Now, Rosetta is a commercial product. So if you registered in advance, we have given you a free trial to the Essentials product. So when you log on to Rosetta, you should see Essentials in the top left-hand corner. That is essential, no pun intended, to get the most out of this masterclass today. But if you don't have it, either reach out to us now or we'll try and take care of that or you can also, as it says on this screen, follow up afterwards as well. So before we get stuck in, I'd like to hear from you all. What do you want to get out of this masterclass? So we're going to do a very quick, just a simple participant poll. So Win, if you could bring that up for folks, please. There it is. So if you could just navigate over to that. And what this poll is asking is, what are some of the challenges that you are facing in your organization when you're considering adopting the CDM and DRR? And we've added a number of choices here around the cost, effort, the time, the challenge of mapping data, dealing with specific data requirements, and integration challenges in general. Please choose your favorite of these items. I'll just keep talking for a moment. There's about 100 of you out there, so give you all a chance to answer. And then perhaps if you, I don't know, Wing, if you can see if we've got many answers. If you think we have, maybe you can finish the poll. We can see the answers. Okay. So let me see if I bring that over here. It's a little bit small. I don't know if you can see that. The top choice with 55% of you said mapping data. Then we had 18% of integration challenges and 10% of firm-specific data requirements. So we'll come back to that poll a little bit later, but I very much hope that today's masterclass will really answer that primary challenge we saw there, mapping data into the CDM. So in terms of our agenda, it is a 2-hour masterclass. I know that's quite long. We will try and fit in a break towards the middle. We're going to talk very quickly about who we are at Regnosys. We're going to spend a bit of time introducing you to Translate 2. And then we're going to go through the story of Acme Bank and how they've adopted the CDM and DRR using these capabilities. And that's going to include some hands-on exercises. So at Regnosys, our tagline, we say we help firms comply safer, cheaper, and faster, allowing financial institutions to address their regulatory reporting requirements with less risk, lower costs through collaboration and working together. And this slide, quite a lot of words on here, but this just gives you a little bit of an overview of how we do that, how we use best practices and everything that exists in the CDM and DRR to lower your risk, lower your cost, and through our own technologies, Rosetta, some of which you'll see today, help you deliver faster as well. And that's using the standardization of the products and the collaboration that you get through using CDM and DRR, as well as the Rosetta integration services. As many of you will know, our platforms are based on open source. There are basically 3 levels that we see here. The foundation is the RUNE, which is the domain-specific language that underpins both the CDM and DRR. The RUNE was originally built by my colleagues here at Regnosys and contributed as open source to FINOS. Likewise, the CDM was sponsored in its early days by ISDA and built on their behalf by Regnosys and a number of other key contributors, and is also now FINOS aligned and open source. And DRR is built on both of those and is still owned by ISDA, but has a open access policy, which means you can get access with ISDA's permission. And we use those technologies alongside Rosetta, which is our platform, which enables organizations to go through these key 4 steps of ingesting data from external sources within the organization and getting the data into the CDM, enriching data using internal and external sources, using DRR to report that data into formats ready for regulatory reporting, and project, which produces the trade repository format output ready to go to the trade repository. And we'll cover all of these four during this session today. Overall, our view is adopting the CDM and adopting DRR is not hard. But we do believe that there is a little bit of a fear factor out there. Many people and organizations think that it's a little bit too difficult. And with everything else that's going on in their organizations, there is this slight attitude of, come and find me later. I've got other things to do. But we believe that we have got a solution now to help organizations with the fundamental challenge of getting the data into the CDM. And that's what we want to show you today. And we're going to show that to you through the journey of Acme Bank. Now, I imagine it's obvious to you that Acme Bank isn't a real organization. It's a representative of all of the clients that we talk to, both banks and non-banks, vendors and systems integrators, and other financial institutions as well. And through using the example of Acme, we want to demonstrate to you the journey to implementation. So we went to our friends at Acme Bank, and yes, they all look like this because they're fiction characters really. But we went to the stakeholders at Acme Bank, and we asked people in different functions, like I did to you all at the beginning, what are your key challenges and your key concerns in adopting CDM and DRR? And similar to what you've all told us, we get some consistent messages around integrating CDM, the costs and timelines of doing that, the challenges of mapping and the effort required to do that, and then some concerns that firm-specific data will be a challenge. Now, Acme Bank is a large and complex institution. And when we look inside Acme Bank, we find they have many, many applications or many different front office product areas. And of course, like you all, they have the requirement to produce regulatory reports for many, many jurisdictions. And they have many, many different tools and data repositories throughout the organization as well. And unfortunately, they don't have a very neat and tidy architecture. Now, I might have taken a bit of artistic license here, but I hope that this, in some ways, illustrates some of the challenges that probably many of you are facing of highly complex systems and integrations across the organization, which leads to high cost and a certain amount of fragility and low flexibility. And I think, perhaps like many of you, Acme's leadership and their technical teams have listened to FINOS, and they've listened to ISDA and ISLA and ICMA and the other trade associations, and they've heard about the CDM and they've heard about DRR, and they believe that this really is the right way to do it. They've understood that the CDM allows you to take data from all of the different product-aligned front office applications, standardize it in CDM, pass it into DRR, and with very little additional work from DRR, produce output for all of the different required jurisdictions. They've also heard that they can do this for many asset classes, not just OTC derivatives, but also cash instruments as well, and increasingly for other areas of the firm, such as securities finance. And they've also heard that it isn't just about regulatory reporting, but there are other use cases which can be addressed using the CDM, for example, collateral management. But their challenge is that their data today from those different product-aligned upstream systems is in a variety of different formats. Some of them can be internal formats. Some of them can be vendor formats, and it can be a selection of different technical standards, FPML, XML, JSON, maybe CSV files, or other different types of representation. So as we've all identified, the big challenge is, how do we get all of that different data into the CDM? So now I'm going to try and show you how we did this for Acme Bank. So I'll bring across my browser here, and I'm going to open up the DRR for Acme Bank project. We never had quite so many people in a webinar before. We've all got you probably on Rosetta as well. But we can go into the ingest panel down here, make that a bit bigger. We can select some incoming data. Now, in this case, I'm going to look at Acme Bank's OTC data in a JSON format. I open that up and I run in some sample data. We've got different samples here for equity, interest rate swaps, and some credit swaps. Let's have a look at the interest rate swap. We open that up, and what we can see in this left panel here is a hierarchical view of Acme Bank's internal data. We just click on this icon here, we can look at the underlying data. So in this case, Acme Bank's underlying data that is represented in their in-house systems is JSON. And you can see this data here probably looks somewhat familiar to what you might see in your own systems, is JSON data. What we have in the central panel here is that data mapped to a proper CDM message. So we have a tradable product, we have a product, contractual product, economic terms, a couple of payouts. And the data is all mapped here. And again, we can look at the underlying data as JSON representation. So what we've done here is Acme's internal data has been mapped to the JSON data, and we've also run some diagnostics on the right, including the fact that CDM has identified this product as being a fixed rate interest rate swap, as we'd expect. In Rosetta, we also have the Enrich, Reports and Projection tabs. I'm going to take you straight over to the Projection tab. I'm going to open up that same set of input data. I'm now running it not just into CDM, but I'm running it from CDM all the way through to DRR, and going to open up that same input. And what we now see in the output here is the data that is now represented, ready for reporting to the TR. And specifically, if we look at the underlying data, we see this is ISO 2022 and has the ISO XML format that you would expect for such a regulatory example. And over here again, we have...
Lionel, sorry for interrupt, but some people are trying to see if they have to follow what you're doing right now, or is it just like...
you're watching at the moment.
The exercise will come up.
The exercise will come in a moment. This is just that introduction. We're just about to get into the exercise in a moment.
Thank you. I wanted to make it clear for everyone.
Thanks, Olivier. Let's look then. I've shown you how it's all working. Let's have a look at how that is done. And specifically, we want to introduce to you Translate 2.0, which is the name we've given to the new function of being able to model and map data using RUNE. And as I said, RUNE is the underlying capability that enables us to do this. It enables clarity, but most importantly is executable as code, as well as being readable as a definition as well. And RUNE is what underpins Translate 2. RUNE is open source. Translate 2 is open source. So most of the capabilities that you're going to see today are available as open source. We will also be showing you some added features in Rosetta And we also have further commercial offerings that use these capabilities. But I hope that we'll illustrate, just got a couple of icons here. The FINOS icon will appear on pages when we're talking about features that are completely open source, but I will differentiate also with the Rosetta icon where there is a dependency on our commercial offerings. So what I want to take you through is this process that we call model-driven ingestion. And there's three steps in this process. And in a moment, we're going to go through 3 rounds of exercises where you can be hands-on and experiment on this. So the first step is to model your data. The second step is then to map your data to the CDM. And then the third step is to test that and then to iterate. So you can see in the graphic on the right, 100%. You want to get to a test situation where you've got all of your data mapped and the validations are showing that. And we feel the best way to do that is to iterate through rounds of modeling and mapping and testing to drive the completeness up. So how do we go through those steps? What we've done is basically is extend the RUNE modeling language using the existing type and enum constructs to enable you to define your external data. Then we've also used the existing functions or func in the RUNE DSL, which is what we used to do the model-to-model mapping. There are some rich features in the DSL which allow you to create quite complex data objects, but with high degrees of modularity and reuse. And as I said earlier, because RUNE is a language which is connected to code generators, you can then generate runtime capabilities to populate your data models and also then to run the mapping. On the right-hand side of this page within Rosetta Design, we also have the facility for you to create and edit those models. And then in the Rosetta engine, the ability to test that by running the code. As I said, the RUNE supports code generation. So within Rosetta, we create the executable code and run it effectively behind your browser, which allows you to do interactive testing. And I've seen there's quite a lot of people asking about their rights this afternoon. It is the rights to the Rosetta trial, which gives you that capability to run the engine. If you haven't been able to get to that, you will still be able to do quite a lot of what we're talking about, or at least follow along. And I will be showing a lot of the capabilities to you as well. So going into the masterclass exercises, what we want to show you is how Acme Bank achieve this full end-to-end integration of the CDM and the DRR. Now, in 2 hours, we don't really have enough time, honestly, to do all of the complexities of CDM and DRR. So we're going to take a quite simple use case and work through that with you. And the use case that we've chosen is the requirement to take some client reference data and load just that small amount of data into the CDM. So we want to show you how we can do this. So this is our first Acme Bank Translate POC that we're going to work on together. And the objective is to take some CSV data, which you can see on the screen here. Not a lot of it. It's quite simple, but it is CSV data. And we want to map that, model that in RUNE, and map it into the CDM without any software code, no Java, no Python. And we want to do that in a few minutes. And as I've already said, we're going to do that through the 3 steps. And there will be effectively one exercise that you can do alone or we can do together for each of these. First, modeling the data. So modeling that CSV input file. Secondly, mapping the data. So mapping the columns in the CSV file to the appropriate place in the CDM. And then third, to iterate through that a couple more times to see how we can validate the data quality and test the results. So according to the first one we're going to do together is the model step. Now, in a moment, I'll ask you to go into Rosetta and work through this. We'll probably give you about 5, 6, 7 minutes. Have a go at it. Do ask for help if you need it. But after that time, regardless of whether you've quite completed or not, I will then walk through it with you and show it to you. So the objective of this exercise is to model the data, to take that CSV file and to define it as a data model in RUNE. So you'll see this link at the bottom of the page. I don't think you'll be able to click on it, but you can type it into your browser. And there's also a link Cash has just put in the chat window. So if you open up that link, it should take you to this web page, and you can just scroll through this web page and follow the instructions to open up Rosetta and work through this. So I'll stop talking for a few moments and invite you all to have a go. I do see a number of you commenting about running into security blocks within your organizations. I'm sorry about that if you're experiencing that. I will, as I said, in a few minutes, I'll go through this so you can see what we're doing. What we could suggest is you can use a personal device at a later time to run through these exercises as well. All of this is accessible on the public internet, so you may find it easier to run through those from a personal device or a personal network.
Can we maybe put the content of the CSV file into the chat so people can copy paste so they don't have to download it?
We can try that, yes. Let's see. I couldn't copy and paste. So folks, if you can't, you can actually, you should be able to see the CSV file on the screen and on the site. So you can also copy and paste this. The CSV file that is linked down here is exactly the same content. You can just copy and paste this as well. Tony says, where's the create button? The create button is the pink thing in the workspace manager. There it is. I'll just give you a summary of the steps that we're going to go through. So we've asked you to, first of all, go into Rosetta and create a workspace. And then to create a namespace, and the instructions go into the detail of that. And then to define a data type for the client file data model, and then check the results. We're not going to upload the CSV file in this exercise. We're just going to start to model the data file. So I'll tell you what, I will show everybody how to do this. And so if you are struggling, follow along, or even if you've succeeded, follow along as well. So to do this, we'll come into the Workspace Manager and we want to create a workspace. So workspace is where you can make your own contributions or extensions to models. So I'm going to create a workspace that is based on the CDM for Acme Bank, give it a name and create that. This is giving me my own environment in which I can now do my modeling. And then I go into the textual view here, and we have on the left a number of namespaces. I want to create a new namespace, and I'm going to call this it's going to be a modeling namespace, and we're modeling client data, and it is of type. And so that creates here a new namespace as I described under Acme's CDM project in a model hierarchy and a client hierarchy, and it's of type. And I can now enter my RUNE code. And what I want to do here is I want to describe that CSV file in RUNE. Basically, what I want to do, if I just make sure I can see both, is I'm going to write a definition of a data type, which we start with the type keyword, and then I'm going to call it Acme Client. So I'm going to define this data type, and I'm just going to basically say that each of the columns in the CSV file is going to be a RUNE attribute. So the first column is client ID, and it's of type string, and it's got a cardinality of optional and up to 1. So this is a CSV file, so you can't have repeating columns in a CSV file. So we're going to have the same structure in terms of cardinality and string for all of these attributes. So then the next column is client name, do the same definition. Then we have client email, and then we have account number, and then we have account. Now, you notice I'm being somewhat careful with my capitalization. That's quite important because attributes always have to start with a lowercase letter, and data types like Acme Client always have to start with a capital letter. And now we've defined our data type. If you then go to the graphical view up here in Rosetta, we can now search for that data type, which just happens to be at the top because it starts with A. And there is the definition graphically of our data model for the Acme client file. So it's got 6 attributes which correspond to the 6 columns in the input file. Now we can also now go into the ingest panel. Sorry, I'm going too fast. We don't go into the ingest panel there. So that's the first task defined. We've created a data model which represents the format of our input file. Now the next step is we want to map the data that is going to be in that input file into the CDM. So to do that, we want to write some functions, and within those RUNE functions, we're going to define the inputs and the outputs and some data mapping. So in a similar manner, I'd like you to have a go at this. There's another page of instructions that you can work through. That's the tiny URL Acme Maps, and I'm sure my colleagues will paste that as well. And I'd ask you to have a go at some of the next few steps, and then in a few minutes I will work through it with you and show it to you as well. And specifically the steps we're going to go through are, we're going to create another namespace, which is going to be a function or func namespace. We are then going to create an ingest function. We're going to then define the inputs and outputs for that function, set up a test pack, and then iteratively we'll add some set statements. Please have a look at the Acme Maps tiny URL and see if you can work quickly through this example. And I'll come back in a few moments and we'll work through that one again. Manoj has asked a good question, which he said, in this example, we just had the 6 columns in the input data file, and therefore it's quite easy, as you saw me to do, to write the model that I wrote with just the 6 data items. And he says, when you've got a much more complex model, how would you do that? And there is a little reference to that actually on the slide I just talked about, which we aren't doing today, which is to import the data model. So if you have a complex, for example, XML model with a schema, we do have some utilities which allow you to take that schema in and to auto-generate the RUNE code for your data model. there's over 100 of you out there. It's a little bit hard to gauge progress and how well you're doing. But if you feel you're doing well and you want me to continue, perhaps put a plus in the chat window, which is the same as a thumbs up, right? I don't know, I think you can use that. If you can do a thumbs up or a plus, or just to show you're on board. And when I've got a few of those, we'll move on. To some of the questions about the utilities for importing schemas, it's not something I'm going to show today because it doesn't actually do anything other than run as a Java function and then appear magically in RUNE. But if anybody's particularly interested in doing that, please do reach out to us and we can discuss that with you. Okay, I think given I'm seeing some positive thumbs up, and the interest of time, I'll start slowly to walk through this example. Please follow along or continue as you see fit. So this was our data model defining our input file. We're now going to create a set of functions to do the data mapping. So we put them in this section here of our namespace hierarchy. So we start off by creating a new namespace in that hierarchy. And we're going to call that ingest, and then mapping and client. And we're going to give that as a function data type. And that then creates this function namespace here. Now, the first thing we have to do is we have to link the namespaces through an import statement so that this function namespace has access to the Acme data model that we defined earlier. So I say, give the full namespace name, and I'm going to just give it a short name, an alias. So I'm importing from this namespace into this file. And I also want to, import the CDM model for where we're going to put the data. And that's the party data type. I know where that is, so I've done this a few times. So I'm going to reference that namespace as well. And if you want to know where that is, it's in the CDM model. So within here, we've got the whole of the CDM model is in here as well. Within base static data party, we can see the party data type definition. So this is where we want to map our CSV data into. We're going to put it into this data model for party inside the CDM. And so to do that, we need to create a function, and we want to give it a name. So it's an ingest function, and its purpose is to ingest Acme's client data. And then on this function, we put an annotation, and the annotation tells RUNE what kind of input file we're going to ingest. So CSV in this case. And then we define, as we do in all functions, what are the inputs to this function. And so the first input is going to be the Acme client data. And so we give it an attribute name, and we say it is of data type Acme client from the Acme namespace. And we're going to say 0 to 1 of those. Acme client. And then we want an output. And the output is going to be a CDM party. and it's going to be 0 to 1 of them. And I've just noticed my mistake up here. I called this Acme CDM. I meant to call it Acme. So if that is then consistent with that, and we have no red lines, we've got some good code. So now we've just defined the function that's going to take the input of the model we defined earlier for Acme, and is going to provide an output of a party. Now, this time, if we go to the ingest tab, we'll now see in our ingest drop down here, a new item has appeared, which is Acme client data. So the fact that we've got this ingest function with the annotation has told Rosetta that we've now got a new ingest function. And we can now set a test pack for our ingest function. So let's create a test pack of CSV data, and let's add some samples. So where are my samples? My samples are here. So here I have that CSV file, the one that you were all trying to download earlier. Let's take that and put it in here. And its CSV files has many rows. So it's automatically parsed those rows and split them into different samples. So now I add those samples to my workspace, and these samples are now in Rosetta. And you can see that Rosetta has opened up their CSV file and has read the CSV files as columnar data. And it says the output of our mapping needs to go to a party object, but it's saying party ID is required but does not exist. So at this point, we haven't actually done any mapping. All we've done is we've created a function to define the mapping from an input to an output, but we haven't actually mapped the data at all. So let's consider how we might do that. Oops, sorry. If I go back up here, we now need to write some RUNE to do the actual mapping. And you can see up here, there's this squiggly line was actually giving us an error all along. It says there needs to be some implementation here. So we need to give it an implementation. And the way we do that is we use some set statements, which basically says, let's define how we're going to populate the output of this function. Most simply, we want to say, let's set party, which is the output. And let's say we're going to set party to a party data object, and we're going to define the contents of the party data object. And the first attribute in the party data object is going to be the name. And we're going to set that to the column client name from our input file. So I've just mapped one column. Do you see this one here is got wiggly red line underneath? It's saying you're missing some attributes. So we have a little workaround to that, which is we can just put an ellipsis here, which tells RUNE to fill in all of the remaining attributes. But it's saying we still need party ID. Let's have a look. We can't run our ingestion yet. We've still got to resolve these errors. So then let's add in our missing field, which is identifier. So I need to write a mapping for identifier, and very simple, sorry, I'm not doing this right. We have to start, if you look at the party data model that we had down here, we need to do a party identifier, and a party identifier is an object with an identifier and an identifier type. So we need to follow that correctly. So going back to here. So we need a party ID, and that is of type party identifier. And again, it's a complex object, and I am going to set the identifier in here, and I'm going to take that from the Acme client model, and specifically the client ID column. And now I should have some good code. Okay, waiting to rerun. Rerun. Here's my input data. That was my sample row of my CSV file. And now in the output, we've got some nice mapping. We've got the name has come through, the identifier has come through. And if we look at the underlying JSON, we've now got a little CDM object with the right data items populated in it. So I'm going to just go back to my presentation deck. So what we ran through there was we created the function namespace. We created the ingest function. We defined the inputs and the outputs of that function. We imported the CSV file as our test pack. And then we added the first few set statements to map those columns to the CDM. You'll remember that I said there were 3 steps. We've gone first through the first 2, map and model. But actually, we've also started to use already the 3rd step, the test and validate step. So you've seen how we use the ingest function to take our sample data through and got it to start to appear in the output. We have one more exercise, and I'm going to run this one slightly differently, which I'll cover in a moment, which is similar to before. There is a page for you to look at, and we're going to go through a little bit more mapping. What I'd also like to suggest, if I skip forward a little bit to here, is you can also look at some of the other models in our Acme projects. So we have some of those, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But what I think we will do, while I'm just changing around the schedule a little bit, is give you a 5-minute break until about 5 past the hour. Have a go at this 3rd validation exercise. See how if you can go through perhaps and complete the early exercise if you haven't done already. And Oscar and Cash will continue to answer questions in the chat, and we'll return if you want to take a break. We'll return also in 5 minutes and continue the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Lionel. I just put a non-tiny URL for the exercise.
Thank you.
Because I think some people are
Yes.
blocked in their environment.
Thank you. It's fantastic to have over 100 of you on this call. I am particularly impressed by at least 2 people I can see in Tokyo, where it is way past your bedtime. Okay, it's about 5 past. So I will just continue a little bit to round off this exercise. And so what we wanted to do in this exercise was to add some further mappings to build out this party object and make sure that we have all of the columns in our input field, in our input file, mapping through to the CDM. We've done the client name. We've done the client ID. We need to do the 3 columns for account. So let's have a go at that. Let's map an account object in the CDM. So it's going to be an account attribute. It's an account data type. And let's add the crucial 2 attributes in account, which is account name. So I'm going to map that to the input from the ACME file of account name. And I want to also map the account number and do that very simply in the same way to the input account number. And I put my ellipsis so that we fill in any spare fields. And just leave a comma there. And we're good. And ingest says waiting to rerun. Let's hit rerun. There's our sample file. That was the input for the account. Let's see. Yep, it's come through account number, account name. And we can look at the JSON rendition of the CDM and see that that is also populated correctly here. So that's a slightly but little different mapping here. Let's look at some other improvements that we can do in our model as well. One of the, if I just take off this ellipsis here, you will see that now party identifier is not complete, and it's saying that the missing attribute is identifier type. So if I have a look at identifier type in the CDM, identifier type, let me go to, sorry, it's party, isn't it? Party, go to party, and party identifier has got an identifier type and a identifier, party identifier type enum. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once, which is one of the enums, BIC, LEI, or MIC. But if I look at my input file, my client IDs from ACME, they will look like LEIs. So what I want to do now is I want to set in the CDM the party identifier type enum. I'm just going to hard code that to be LEI. So I just say identifier type should be set to, and it's really easy. You just say LEI. Run it again, and there it is. That has been mapped through, and it's converted it added the static value, because we know in our input file they're all LEIs, added that in as a enum in the CDM model. What else have we got in our input file? We also got count type here. We haven't modeled. So let's look again at the CDM account. And so what does an account type look like? An account type is also an enum. And let's look at the different values here. We've got aggregate, client, and house. and we've got a string in our input file. So what we need to do now is we need to write a mapping that looks at the value in the input column and then map that into a enum in our CDM. So let's go back to our mapping function. Yeah. Now to do that, we're going to write another function. So the CDM and the DRR are built on many different functions. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write an extra function that does the mapping from a string to an enum. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to copy what I did earlier. For those of you who watch Blue Peter, if you don't understand what I mean, I'm just copy and paste what I have earlier. So here's a function to map a type to a enum. And this mapping function takes an input string and provides an output of an account type enum. And it does that simply with a switch statement that says, given the inputs, if the input in the file coming in the CSV says client, then set the output to the enum client. Same for house. And then in the Acme's file, they call them top accounts. We know that a top account addressed by Acme should go into a CDM aggregate client. So there's my function to do this. And now I just need to add a call to that function in my mapping function. So here it is going to be account type should be set to the output of the account type to enum function. And I'm going to give that function the value of the input file column account type. I just need to follow that. So it's all go. Ready to rerun. And now we have our account. It's now populated with the number, name, and type. Again, looking at the underlying JSON, there is our value of our enum as well. Now, this particular sample file, one of the rows in my CSV has got house. Let's have a look at one of the other ones. There's a client one there, so we can look at that. And it says clear client here, and that has also come through correctly as client as well. So we've been through now some additional mapping steps. We've been through showing you how you can map enums, use conditional mapping, and I've shown you a number of iterations where we are checking the results and then rerunning that multiple times in Rosetta. And there was a question earlier, I'm not sure what might have been asked, but we haven't looked much at the diagnostics on the right here. But this is now showing that we've got 100% of our input file is mapped. And the validations, the validations are the ones that exist in the CDM that ensure that we are creating valid CDM objects. These have all been run, and you can see that the validations that exist in the CDM have all correctly been validated, and we've got successful cardinality in our data model our data object that we've created in the CDM. So that's how we go through an iteration of getting to 100% by repeating this process in Rosetta. There's one other part of this iterative testing, which we believe is very useful as well, which is the concept of regression testing. So you may have noticed that in my ingest inputs here, that they are colored. And this shows the fact that the results here have changed. So what I can do is I can say, I've now been successful in my mapping. Let's select these sample files and let's accept them as being good test cases. So I've said, yes, I want to update the expectations for this sample. And now they've all gone blue. And this means if I go back up here now and I change my mapping, how about if I just comment out that mapping, it now reruns and immediately we see a whole bunch of red because our output is no longer the same as our expectations. So that's now become a failed regression test. If I revert that change correctly, it will rerun in a moment. There we go. And all the tests are passed again. I can do something else. Remember, we had different values at the of the identified type. If I change that to MIC, again, Rosetta will, every time this is happening, Rosetta's taking this RUNE code, it's generating Java code, it's building the Java code, it's running the Java code behind, putting all of the samples through that, and it's giving this results in real time. And you can see down here, not only is it identified these samples are no longer passing the regression tests, it's also identify exactly what that mismatch was. That this column is, this attribute is no longer the same as it was initially. Correct that back again, and everything will be rerun and is passing again. What I hope I've shown to you in the last 45 minutes or so is the process of loading client reference data into the CDM. If you go into the DRR for Acme Bank, there is actually a full solution for this one. So go into DRR for Acme Bank and you can find in here, in the ingest and in the model, there is a full solution for the client, which is a bit more sophisticated than the one I've been talking you through here. A few more functions, a little bit more validation, a bit more commentary. You can go through that in your own time and understand that. And it's linked to the tinyURL pages as well. Of course, and that's what this page illustrates. Of course, this was a very simple exercise. And as we've already identified, Acme's real business is a lot more complex. They obviously do OTC derivatives, securities, ETDs, etc., and they want to map a lot of data. And so you'll remember this picture top where we said fundamentally their problem is maintaining models and mapping for all of those different types. So we have got examples which we would encourage you to look at after today's masterclass. We have two projects in Rosetta, one which is CDM for Acme Bank, one is DRR for Acme Bank. The reason for those being separate is the CDM examples are leveraging the capabilities of the latest version of CDM, which is CDM 7. So they support these use cases particularly well: listed derivatives, securities lending, and regular securities trading. So we have examples in the CDM Acme Bank project of these different asset classes modeled in hypothetical data in JSON, in XML and CSV, and going into the CDM in the CDM7 format. Then in the DRR for Acme Bank project in Rosetta, we have examples for OTC derivatives, interest rates, and other types as well, also as FPML. And these ones are again in XML and JSON, and these go not only into CDM, but all the way through to Acme Bank. And that is basically the same demonstration I gave you right at the very beginning. So again, if we're now in DRR for Acme Bank, we can go into the ingest tab and we can see what I was talking about. We have got multiple examples here, as well as the party one that we've just gone through together. We've got examples of IRS data and OTC data in different formats. If we look at the OTC data here, we've got some equity examples, some interest rate swaps, and some credit And all of these you can take through the process of seeing how this hypothetical ACME Bank input data is mapped into the CDM and then through the next steps. So I just want to talk about the next steps a little bit. I'm going to skip the break time. We've had the break time, and I'm going to take you through next. We're going to look at FPML. Just sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit. Don't know my own presentation. I showed you these ones here, which are the different versions of ACME Bank's data, which we have already built out in these sample files. We have identified some other data samples, which we believe the community would find useful to see how you can use Translate 2 and how they can be mapped into the CDM. These include examples for the collateral world, also for FX spot and forwards, and then also for legal agreements and repos. So these are some samples and mapping which we intend to develop over the coming months and make available to the community in the ACME projects. If there are other data samples which any of you would think would be useful for the community to see, please also reach out to us and we'd be happy to talk about that. Which does take me on to FPML, which is really the next set of samples that we've already built out. FPML ingestion into the CDM has been a feature in the CDM for a long time. What we've done now is we've taken the historical, what were called synonyms, which was a rather esoteric and difficult to use mechanism for ingesting data, and we've converted all of that for FPML into this new translate capability. As you might expect, in order to do that, the first thing we had to do was create a RUNE model of FPML data. So this, again, is totally open source. If you go into your workspace, you should find the FPML as RUNE project. You can open this up, and it has got data model, just like the ones we've been looking through here, which defines FPML as a RUNE data model. And it can be seen in its glorious complexity. Sorry, I was going a bit too fast for Rosetta. There we go. Can be seen in its glorious complexity here as a very hierarchical, complex XML model, which any of you who have dealt with FPML will understand that it is many, many layers and so on. So that's all been modeled as RUNE and is available. And alongside that, if we go to the latest version of CDM, so that's DRR, CDM. We've got the data model in RUNE, but we've also got the mapping of FPML data into the CDM defined as RUNE functions. So again, I can show that to you in the CDM. It's in the CDM as, unsurprisingly, mapping, FPML, and the confirmation, workflow step, and trade state. And these are the historical, the old style, what were called synonyms. That was the way that it was done before. The new style, Translate 2.0, functions can be found under ingest, FPML, and again here. And you can see the functions that we've written to do that mapping. Now, this is where this will illustrate to those of you who want to get into this, how I think if this isn't an oxymoron, how it's both complex but also simple. So when you're mapping a model like FPML, obviously there is some complexity because FPML is huge. But when you actually break it down into these constituent parts, the code that's required to do the mapping is really quite straightforward. So here is a snippet of code to map a certain part of the FPML model to a CDM counterparty. And you'll see here, it's just these lines of code. It's very, very similar to what we've already been through together. And this illustrates the power of this capability. And we've made all of this open source in CDM and in the RUNE model, as you've seen. The capabilities are all in Rosetta as well. So if you, in the community edition, you can still run FPML ingestion of FPML files into the CDM. So let's take a gas call option, which is in its glorious FPML complexity, comes through then into the CDM structure using this new translate to capability. So what I want to talk to, and I think this is the penultimate session we've got today. We're about 90 minutes in, so we're pretty much on time at this point. What we're going to go through next is really explaining the end-to-end solution for Acme. So ultimately, Acme doesn't only want to get their data into the CDM. They want to go a bit further. They want to produce DRR capabilities. They want to produce TR-ready data out of DRR. And right at the beginning, I talked about the 4 steps that we need to go through here. We focused a lot so far on ingest, which is the ability to get the data from external formats or internal formats into the CDM. What we're going to look at next is the 3 subsequent steps: enrich, report, and project. So the idea behind enrich is it's the ability to take data that has been brought into the CDM and add additional data to it. An example of that might be adding some reference data from additional internal systems or integrating with external systems. And there's a couple of examples on the page here: ANA DSB for getting UPIs and Glyph for getting LEIs. And again, in the Acme model, we have some examples of this. So you can find these in Acme DRR. There is a set of enrich functions shown in the screenshot on the left here, which can enrich data for LEI. And then you can see that on the right with enrichment in the CDM and the data being pulled in from the Glyph database of Enriching. I'm not quite sure why we happen to have chosen an example with a lapsed LEI. Maybe it's because we chose Credit Suisse. I can show this to you very quickly. So we go back to, let's go to the Enrich tab. We're going to take that collection required. Again. Sorry, I'm on CDM. I need to go back to my DRR project. I was in the wrong place. Okay, we're back in our DRR, Acme for DRR. Now we're going to go to Enrich, and we're going to find our OTC enrichment process, and we're going to load in our test pack for that. We're going to have a look at our 5-year interest rate swap example. Previously, we were looking about how the external representation from the upstream system of that data was mapped using ingest into the CDM. What we're looking at now is taking some of that data then further downstream and using the enrichment function. And this is where you can see that the LEIs that were in the party IDs in the inbound object as just identifiers of the two parties on the trade on the inbound object have now been enriched. And we've got the additional information about those LEIs is now added onto this object. And that was performed, as I said, by the enrichment function here. And so what is happening behind the scenes is there is a function being called here, which then has behind the scenes a Java implementation, and that implementation then does the API integration to the Glyph service and does that enrichment. But all of that can be seen and exposed as RUNE functional code here. And then it's obviously run automatically when testing in Rosetta. And then, of course, when you get to a production implementation, it will be run as well. So that's our enrich example. The next step in the process is report. And this is where we run the DRR rules against CDM objects to start to create data ready for jurisdiction specific reporting. I'm not going to go into that in great detail today because today's not really about the details of DRR, but I hope that helps you understand how that fits into this flow. And then the fourth step is then project, which is then taking that data object, which is ready for regulatory reporting, and projecting it out to a TR-ready format, for example, ISO 222. And then at the same time as that, applying validation rules against that data, which is effectively duplicating the validation rules that exist at the TR that would ultimately, in a production use case, run, that would create NACs. So I can just show you that. And so I go back. This time from enrich, I'm going to go through to projection. Going to take my same example of the 5-year interest rate sample. This is my object in the DRR. This is the reportable fields in a generic option. And I now project that out to the ISO 222 format. And over here, this is where we're running the diagnostics and effectively the NAC rules. So this is saying that if we were to send this ISO TR report to a TR, it would have 3 NAC failures related to these particular attributes. So our way of looking at this is this provides you a way of doing, again, the interactive testing. You can go back into the prior steps and improve upon your data quality, and then in real time, run these tests, close out these validations, drive your validation percentage up here to 100%, and then know that you've got a model that works for everybody. So that is the purpose of project, getting us to the ISO. I'm going to, in the last topic for this afternoon, I'm just going to touch a little bit more on other capabilities in Rosetta to really deliver upon cheaper, faster, safer. My mad scientist has been helping me with this process, and we've gone through the steps together of iteratively modeling data, mapping data, and validating it. I tried really hard to make that wheel spin, but I couldn't make it do that. I wanted that to be my party trick, but I couldn't do that. But what we want to look at now is just a little bit about some of these features and how they work. So as we've seen, within Rosetta, you can view and update projects. So the CDM and the DRR, and also the two ACME projects, plus the RUNE project. Those are all available in the community free edition, and the testing capabilities alongside those models is available. And we provide those to the community to help everybody with this adoption of these very key open source capabilities. You do, however, need commercial editions of Rosetta to do some of the features. I'm just going to cover off that very quickly. Rosetta Deploy is the capability to have your own environment. So we've been looking at Acme Bank as a sample bank environment where Acme is modeling and mapping their own data. If you would like to work with us to do that for you, we would effectively create your bank and give you those features that are exclusively and private to your bank. And that's backed up by a repository such as the one shown here, where all of the modeling and mapping code is stored. And by having this, you can then build out your own model-based ingestion, model your own data and store that modeling, map your own data and storing those mappings as well. And we believe this is a bunch of tooling which gives you the opportunity to reduce the development time and make it easier to adopt these open source tools, and also help you with future adoption. So the headline for this masterclass today said at the beginning, future-proof. So one of the key capabilities here is the iterative testing and the ability to take new versions of the CDM and the DRR and understand through that regression testing capability what changes you need to be able to make. Another feature I'd like to talk about, I see some questions around API integration. We can illustrate that a little bit for you now. We have a capability for testing DRR, we call DRR in a box. What you can do is, just like I've been doing all afternoon, we did it together at the beginning, you can upload your own sample data. You can add test packs and you can run your own sample data. But if you're doing that, you're running your proprietary, your firm's data on our cloud solution, which may not be in line with your corporate policies around security and privacy. So what DRR in a box is a product which we can ship to you as a Docker container, which can allow you to run DRR front to back through that whole pipeline of ingest, enrich, report, and project, build CDM objects, produce DRR output, and do that all in a simple single Docker container. Now, for some of you, that may be a little bit technical, but the idea of a Docker container is using, again, more open source software. You can run the software we provide you on a Docker container on your own personal device, or sort of your corporate device, whichever it may be, Mac or Windows. You can run DRR on the box, or you can also very easily run it in a cloud configuration or on a server in your environment. And just to show that to you, we have a version of DRR in a box running. You can access that right now at this particular tiny URL. And I think my colleagues will probably paste the not so tiny URL, which is at the top of the screen. Those of you who are technically minded will be familiar with Swagger, yet another open source capability, which enables testing and interacting with APIs. I can show that to you. Here is our DRR in the box sample. Basically, what you can do here is you can use this API to take test data and run it through DRR in a box. So you remember earlier I was testing OTC data, and for various jurisdictions, I can't remember now which jurisdiction I showed you, but let's check ASIC today. I can choose this. I can say, try it out. And it says, give me some data. So I have some data. over here is my OTC JSON. This is Acme Bank's OTC JSON that we saw earlier, that we saw in Rosetta. Now I'm going to put that into Swagger, and I'm going to click execute, and it's now running that JSON file through DR in a box. Now we've got a little bit of a small server, so it's not the fastest thing in the world, but you can also be doing it along with me. And hopefully, he says, in a moment, there we go. So what he's actually done behind the scenes is it's executed a curl command to run against our public API with the JSON payload. And here it is. It's responded back with an ISO 2022 TR ready out. So you can test that to your heart's content using the Swagger environment. This is not a sort of production ready capability. This is for testing. I can just show one more example. Let's do an IRS example. So in this case, it wants the data model is expecting XML. Let's try it out. Well, I've got an XML file here. This is the XML file. Yes, it is. Let's take that XML. Let's pop that in the request body. Let's execute that. This is taking, again, that Acme XML data. This is for an interest rate swap, running it through, ingesting it into the CDM, doing the enrichment, doing the reportable output. And here again is our TR ready output. So that's DRR in a box for being able to test these capabilities within your own environment with your own data. We also have Rosetta Pipelines. So Rosetta Pipelines is how we can help you take all these capabilities to production. And when, of course, you're going to production, you need to be thinking about security and resilience and scalability. So we provide all of these capabilities as individual containers for each of the steps: ingest, enrich, report, project. And we can provide those containers to you, working with you to scale and deliver your production workloads. I think you've seen just through that previous demo that the API integration is quite straightforward, using pretty clear APIs, but there are other things we can do. We worked with clients to do database integration, message-based integration. There's a variety of ways of integrating these pipelines to deliver a front-to-back production-ready solution. I'm nearly there, folks. I just have a few slides left just to conclude this presentation. And I have a key question for you all, for the 80 plus of you who have held on with us this time. Thank you. And I have the key question: are you ready to be a hero? Let's just have a summary of what we talked about today and how we hope that we've set you on a journey to be a hero, to future-proof the trade reporting in your organization. I'm not saying you're zeros today, but I hope you're all heroes tomorrow, and that you can use the CDM and DRR and RUNE to do this. We've seen Translate 2 and these new capabilities in RUNE to model and map. And we've also had a look at some of the capabilities in Rosetta for development and testing, managing regression testing, and then deploying for both test and on-premises. All of this is available today. The core functionality that we've been talking about, Translate 2, the ability to do that into code generation, it's all available. It's all out there. It's in the public repositories, implemented in CDM. It's implemented in DRR in all of the development and production versions. You can see that as the tiles in Rosetta, and you can see the Acme Bank demonstrations, which you've been interacting with today. The CDM for Acme Bank, as I said earlier, based on the latest release of CDM 7. And this is really something that you should be looking at if you're focusing on a broader deployment of CDM in your institution for broader multiple asset classes. If you're more focused within the derivatives arena and on DRR, then the DRR for Acme Bank project may be more suitable for you, and that's based on CDM 5 and DRR 5. As I've said, a lot of this is available as open source. Some of the features I've shown, particularly the ability to have the private extensions, that capability that Acme Bank has got, do their own editions, does require, if you work with us, a Rosetta deploy license. But there is no reason why any of you cannot go out and implement your own capability to use RUNE, to map your own data, to model your own data. If you don't want to work with us, you will just need to develop some of your own tooling around building the right repositories, the right CI/CD capabilities, the right testing capabilities. So there's a choice there, just like in many open source world. Build it yourself using the open source tools, or go to a vendor for some assistance to take the open source a little bit further. Some suggestions. What might you do as a next step on your journey to being a hero? Do please experiment and go through what we've covered today in more detail. The trial that we've given you all will continue for planning 4 days from today. The documentation, the tiny URL links are out there as well. The recording of this masterclass will be made available. We'll also make available the links to the different exercises. I know some of you have run into various technical things, including security barriers. As I said earlier, if you use your own device on the public network, you can probably get around some of that. But do please reach out to us. We would be happy to run dedicated masterclass for a team within your organization. That would perhaps be a little bit more of an interactive session, enable us to go into your particular challenges and experiment on solutions to do that. And of course, we're delighted to talk to any of you about adopting Rosetta or using my team, including Akash. And what's the other guy's name? Oscar. The long session. And the other members of our team to get you to production. So thank you to Oscar, thank you to Akash, and thank you to 80 of you for hanging on for nearly 2 hours. Thank you to our colleagues at FINOS for running and supporting us today. That basically is it. There's a few links there to follow up. We'll stay on for a few minutes. If you've got any questions you want to add in the chat, please do so, and we'll be happy to answer them. And then as people drop off, so will we. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you, everyone. Oscar, Akash, you got a lot of questions. I'm very happy you were there to help everyone. Of course, you can go and do the exercise on your own, and especially for the people who are watching the recording, you can always reach out to us and ask your questions. You have here the link that is still visible. So thanks again. Have a great end of the day, night, if it is very late for you. And I hope to see you in the next masterclass. Thank you.
Thank you.